One. I didn't even check our mics. Let me check that really quick.
Check one.
Boom. All right. Hey, what's up, everyone? This is the Weekly Jargon. I'm Abel Perez.
Jose Rodriguez.
Rohi Zachariah.
And together we're the Three Jargoneers. If you want to sponsor us with some costumes, we'll dress like the Three Musketeers for you. The Three Stooges. Whatever you prefer, right? You know, whatever other trio is out there. Or we could just be ourselves and talk about some randomness. And last week on the show, fellas, we had a special guest, one of our longtime subscribers, one of our biggest fans. I forgot his name. Trash can kicker. He said something about the zombie apocalypse, right? Yeah. And it kind of like, we took it as maybe he's being funny, but then it was like, you know what? That's actually an interesting topic, right? So we're gonna let Rohi kick this off here and get us into the weeds with zombies here.
Well, I know Jose's first reference of a fictional or somehow non-believable thing that could happen, but I was quickly reminding myself of the documentary where there is a zombie virus that I believe infects a certain snail and causes that snail, it controls its body to go sit on a leaf because it needs to be eaten by the next predator. And somehow it's like 2 or 3 predators down the road that's the only spot that this virus can actually reproduce. And somehow, again, through craziness, through some kind of evolution, it's figured this out. But so it's kind of offensive when the internet says it's something that cannot happen. It does happen already in nature.
So do you think that like you kind of mentioned the virus as it says you figured it out, right? Is it? Do you think it figured and knows what it's doing from the start, or is it just kind of a phenomenon that happens because of the coincidences of it being?
I mean, it's. I'm not going to be. I don't have my PhD on it, but I think scientifically speaking, evolution always comes about by efficiency. So this virus could have been reproducing for billions of years, whatever, and at some point it found that it was more successful at reproducing. Again, that's through genetics, meaning one virus went this way and the other one went the other way, and this one ended up reproducing. That's just evolution in general, and just through that repeating process has come to where its neurons tell it to do this, control this, and do these steps to better
You sound like a scientist, you know.
Well, I do study quite a bit on my free time.
Well, no, just when you say the word evolution, it triggers different conversations. But you're right in that. But you mentioned something that this is like a parasite,
correct?
That would go into this insect, to make it behave a certain way to reach this destination where then they would find a different host and the cycle repeats itself.
Correct. It's all about reproduction.
Yeah. Reproduction.
So that's the actual science of a zombie, right?
Yeah.
And we have the metaphorical, then and that almost sounds like
it's not good for Hollywood because it's kind of boring.
That sounds like So then you twist it right and you exchange that with people, right? And we talk about the power of persuasiveness and the power of control and people, mankind for years have always thrived for that control, that power, that we call it propaganda. We're going to tell you what to look, what you're going to see. We want you to, what you're going to like, what you're going to believe, in order to be able to control you to do what we want, right? So you have two different things going on. You have the real zombies, right? The actual scientific, process of creating this zombie. And then you have what we see today, maybe your friend, your neighbor, maybe if you look in the mirror, you might find yourself a zombie in certain categories where we're just kind of doing what we're told, and it's almost like puppet, right? We're under this trance of or spell of what's being fed to us, right? And I think you talk about the show Mad Men in the 50s, right? And it was marketing. And it was the, all of the techniques and strategies that went into marketing. And you realize that everything we see, everything we feel, everything we think we like, it was done in a lab essentially, right? It was a group of people who said, we're going to get people to like these things. Yeah. We're going to create an appetite for coffee. We're going to create an appetite for cigarettes. We're going to create an appetite for lingerie, all of these things, right? And we're going to embed this idea that if you are this, an all-American man, then you should be smoking and driving a Harley Davidson and, you know, doing all of these things, right? Whatever that agenda is. So I just find it interesting, and my mind automatically reverts to that, mostly because my mind is it's not possible for me to go the direction Rohi was going with the science stuff, because I don't know any of that details. But that's how I correlate. That's how I kind of like, you know, am correlating that with, you know, what we see every day.
Yeah, and I think, you know, to your point, the metaphor that we use, zombie, right? It's what we see in our society today. Some people feel numb to what's taking place, right? Because they're starting to follow this cycle of continued consumerism, right? Or whatever the media says, right? We're going to go this way now. So to some extent, maybe, you know, zombie can be linked to, and again, these are, you know, obviously opinions. No, you know, there isn't really a identified zombie. What exactly is the zombie? But you can have it metaphorically, physically, and in Hollywood, it's a fictional character that we all know. These humans that get some type of a virus and they become, you know, immortal, right? They rise from the ground and somehow they're half.
But what are those zombies always trying to do?
They're always trying to convert other zombies.
They're always trying to make more zombies.
Correct.
Which I mean, and I think a better Hollywood story that would probably be more frightening. But I mean, I know the zombies of Hollywood it's about scare and the blood and the gore, and that's kind of they're attracting a certain appeal. But I think the more scary one would be the real zombies of like, how would I know, or how would you know I was infected by that disease? You know, because again, that the parasite wants to continue to grow. So, is it making me more like persuasive, like more sexually active? Because that's how it has to do. Like, how would you know the science to say, again, how do I stay away from this guy? I don't, or you know, what is it that's going to make that virus transmit to the next person that you would even recognize it? So it'd almost be more of like that sleeper cell, not like the zombies of today where it's like, here it is, he's got bleeding out, he's you know, whatever. Like he's just there, but he's acting a little different.
I think what I'm hearing is that, you know, over millions of years of evolution, you know, viruses, cells have found a way to say, well, maybe they were resistant to something, but they found a way, right? And in this case, you know, like you said, they're sleeper cells, right? Look at us when we decompose, right? Our current body regulates a lot of this bacteria that we have inside. The moment we no longer have that core temperature, or we are no longer alive, then bacteria begins to infiltrate, and that's how we decompose. Because we have millions of bacteria, not only in our gut, but, you know, who knows? I mean, just to think that you know every single aspect of that bacteria or viruses or cells that we have in our body, they could be sleepers, right? And
well, I'm going to give you the one that's going to hurt your brain the most, because we all know about our inner conscience. That's while I'm speaking these words, there's the other guy that's in the back of my head talking. Maybe that's the virus. Maybe that's the real guy at the steering wheel that, you know, he's a virus and he's there to reproduce.
And I don't disagree there. I mean, we can go down that rabbit hole. I don't disagree, because in a lot of, you know, we go into autopilots, right? But truthfully, everything we hear, everything that's being, you know, we manifest that through something back there, right? Like you said, the subconscious, right? We dream and we start dreaming these crazy ideas. And before you know it, someone invented something, right? Like, how the hell did that happen? Well, I mean, you never know. But, you know, we're talking about this because there is a zombie awareness month. And that's coming up here from May 1st to May 31st. Just so that, you know, I didn't know that.
I need to be aware of it.
I didn't know that.
Is May zombie awareness?
May is a zombie awareness.
So the guy who probably made that, the guy who made that is probably a zombie.
There is a society of zombie and they found it in 2007. So it looks like this is kind of why, you know, people started getting
the city council is going to be making a proclamation.
Well, we may have to make a proclamation for Zombie Awareness Month, right? But I mean, again, I think we're dissecting zombies not only metaphorically, physically, but, you know, the fictional character that you see, right? Because I think in my mind, when I hear zombies, it's exactly what I refer to. A video game, you know, zombies on the Modern Warfare, or zombies from a movie, right? But to come think of what you're talking about, the science part of it, we have seen that. We've seen documentaries where you show these parasites come into they may be carried by a host, and then that host attacks the insect.
Yeah.
The insect then gives birth to another, and
Yeah.
it tells it where to go, like you said. And it's funny, but could be a fungus, could be a bacteria, could be a virus.
Well, there's, yeah, I think you guys went into a good direction, and it started with Rohit talking about like the sleeper cell, right? Like the unknown zombie, right? It's not this, what we see during Halloween, people dressed up with blood all over them and, flesh eating, diseases and going on. It almost reminds me of like, what did Mama always say? Be careful who you hang out with. Who are you hanging around with? Because that influence does make it is a real thing,
Yeah.
right? And so, there are people that, whether it be gangs or just that naughty kid that can influence you to do the wrong things. And that's a version of you being taken over by somebody else who doesn't have control over that little voice in their head saying, hey, that's wrong, don't do that, right? And so then all of a sudden now the voice in your head starts believing that, oh, hey, we didn't get caught, so now, let's do that, right? There's that version, and then I can't help but to think about the one that's not so... I guess the host that's not so worried about imposing itself on others or creating more zombies amongst others, but more so taking over that individual, right? And we see that with addictions, right? Whether that be drug, alcohol, whatever that addiction might be. Jeffrey Dahmer had a crazy fascination and addiction with mutilated animals, and that transpired into him wanting to explore bodies and in humans, and so it just it kept his addiction fueled him to continue on with some very nasty things going on, and those are the things that I think are also scary, right? It's like that zombie before they get to that crazy psychopath. It's like you can see it transpiring in somebody's life, and it might start something as simple as, oh, well, you know what? Every day I get home, I have to have a drink of alcohol, and then that turns into, well, you know what? During my break, I have to have a drink of alcohol. And next thing you know, they have this cup is no longer coffee and it's alcohol, and while doing work, it's there, right? And then over years, you just see it continuing to worsen. And that's just one example, but just it's amazing when you think about zombies, and we were like, you guys are like, hey, we're gonna talk about zombies today. I'm thinking like, really, what the heck are we gonna talk about? But I think it's more of a process or a system that is actually real, right?
Yeah. And it's the idea of you're dead to yourself. It's that because again, like Jose said, like the zombies that are chasing after us, I know that Hollywood says they're dead, but obviously physically, scientifically, they have to be alive to pump blood to keep kind of going. So if you take or term a zombie in that sense, like you were saying with that song, and it's talking about war, the same thing could be said about like the soldiers right now, like in Ukraine. Like at what point do they become a zombie to themselves, where they're just killing just to kill? Like they're not even aware of what they're doing, and obviously, where does that go? Well, because it's about self-preservation, right? It's I'm killing that person to keep myself alive so that I can procreate. Like that's the core of what war is if I don't kill him, he kills me, and then my bloodline dies. Yeah. So you could really kind of get down to that level of saying, like, at what point does the human body just shut off and go into this, like you said, autopilot of it's all about just survival.
And I just want to make sure we give a shout out to that song. That was
I was waiting for it to come in on the intro.
No. The Cranberries, and the reason why is when I first heard it, this was back in '94, and obviously to me it's like a good friend of mine said, hey, you got to listen to this song. And why? Well, it's in your head, something like that, right? Okay, so let's listen to it. And after that, she had a unique voice, right? And she was reverting to, I think, something that took place in Ireland, obviously with the is it the IRA? Remember that big thing? But anyways,
I don't know. I might have to listen to that song. I never
the
heard
Irish
it.
Republican Army. But I think it was a bombing and it killed some children, right? So it's she was referring to like it's in your head, you know, zombie but you know, I never really paid a lot of attention to it because back then my concept of a zombie was back to that fictional character. I didn't really quite understand the metaphor of what she was trying to revert to, which was, hey, you know, we could be walking zombies, not knowing what's really taking place because we're with our bombs and our guns and she's all that, right? I mean, it kind of gives me the chill just to go back to want to sing that song again. But it's telling you, hey, this is what's taking place, and a lot of the times us men, you know, we get to that point. Like you said something earlier about the subconscious, right? We think about all these things back there, but to execute them and to actually take full force on something like that. For example, the atomic bomb, nuclear weapons, you know, going out there and you know, sometimes casualties of war. Yeah. And those casualties of war sometimes aren't, it's not necessarily the who you're after. It's the people that are innocent and typically they die. But I mean, that's part of the war. And when you're walking with that mentality, I think that if you're in that, let's say soldiers, for example, right, that have suffered that kind of traumatic experiences because they've probably been walking like a zombie after they've seen the true reality of what they're actually doing. Yeah. I'm not saying they're not there to protect a certain freedom or concept or ideology. I think in general, once they see the true reality of what took place, they're just like, what the hell?
Yeah. I think that's where, you know, you see the PTSD, right, kind of kick in, you know, and when they're in survival mode, these soldiers, you know, I'm not a veteran and, you know, so I can't really speak on their behalf, but I would imagine, you know, to that point of, when you're out there, you're trying to get home, you're trying to survive, you're in survival mode. So, you know, something has to click in your brain to say, like, I can't think about who's on the other side of these crosshairs. I just have to do it, right? But when the dust settles, you're home, you know, and you have all that time to think about it. I think that's when you start kind of putting, you know, lives to each of those targets that you had. And then that's where, you know, that starts taking over, you know, and that self-conscious is like, oh my God, like, I can't believe that, you know. But, you know, what's interesting about war in general and in that, you know, you guys have used the word numb, you know, getting us numb to things. And, you know, prior to, you know, World War II, you know, it was taboo to see somebody, you know, blown into pieces on the big screen, or, you know, even the death scenes were very, you know, they were very careful, right? The shooting
Artistic.
scenes very it wasn't as gory. You know, you didn't have Quentin Tarantino, you know, blowing people's thumbs off. But it almost seems like as media started becoming more of a thing, as the world started getting smaller because of video cameras and all that kind of stuff, there was almost like a demand. It almost seems like a strategic demand to have Hollywood desensitize the people, right? And now, you know, you go on your video game and you're blowing people up and, you know, shredding them up and chainsawing them and doing all this stuff, right? And so does that make it to where when you see things on TV or hear about things on TV in other countries, it kind of just turns it into like, oh, the word insurgents is used, right? It's not, you know, hey, 50 fathers were killed today in war. No, it's 50 insurgents were killed, right? 50 terrorists were killed, you know, whatever. Thousands of it. And so we in our head just have this number like, oh, that's just a number, you know, we don't really have a face to those numbers. And so we're good with it. That's that desensitizing that's kind of seems to be very strategic in order to justify or in preparation of, hey, this stuff like Vietnam, right? You're going to start seeing some very ugly stuff. So we need to ramp up and get you guys like with the program of like, hey, this is what war is. This is what you can expect. And so now we hear like, oh man, you know, we're doing this stuff, or these bombs went off and all these people died. And it's like, well, that's war, you know, well, that happens, you know. And, you know, but the real human in us is, you know, when something happens locally or to somebody we know, that one life, that one soul is so precious, you know, and you could really feel your heart, like, you know, mourn for them. And I think that's the real human nature. The other stuff, we've just been groomed and, you know, convinced that, you know, oh, that's just the way it is. You know, it's so weird to me.
I mean, I would argue some of that. I mean, I think it's more should be looked at as a coming full circle, because if we think of society, I mean, obviously probably up until maybe the 1800s or so, when they stopped doing like public hangings. I mean, to see, I mean, it's not necessarily grotesque, because obviously there's some dignity to it, but the idea of seeing like a dead body like hanging in public as a display to show you not to do that kind of thing, like that was very commonplace, you know. I don't know at what point society changed gears to kind of say we don't want to see that no more. And by the way, when this comes to media, we also don't want to show it anymore. But like it's almost like we're going full circle to say like no, we need to see it. We need to kind of, it's there. It's a reality. But there is still a lot of that censorship that is still only showing you certain things. Like you said, like right now, if there's people dying all the time, and I can go on YouTube, like I told you I think a couple videos ago, about the drones and showing the drones like killing people and stuff. I mean, YouTube's very accessible. My kids can go and turn that on and do the right Google search and watch that same video. Now they're not seeing the exact body blowing up. There is some censorship, but they can get the idea. So I don't know, like I said, I know you're desensitized, but what was the idea back then? Was it the same thing? Like, here, honey, look, there's a dead body. It's okay. Like, it's just hanging from a tree,
And, I mean, I will say that, I mean, this wasn't too far back when you were still doing hangings in certain parts of the country, right? I mean, it just so happened that the people that were being hung were mainly, people that were of African descent, right? I mean, you saw that up until the early 1900s, and who knows? I mean, not too long ago, I think there was a movie made on the Mississippi burnings and/or hangings that were done. I think there was a stop for the public punishment in that capacity, right? Same thing with the guillotine, right? The French were very notorious for that, but I mean, that type
people came to watch it.
Yeah, they did. I mean,
it was
this
a public
was a spectacle.
spectacle.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. I mean, and hangings were very common right up until the even the Wild Wild West, right? Hey, we got to hang these people, right? And hanging was very common. But now, I mean, you don't see that. But I think that if you go back to the concept of what we think when we say zombies, I mean, you said being numb. Sometimes, we get used to the idea, and I think it's the empathy in the human that says, hey, man, something's not right. It's just not right. I mean, we've been accustomed to follow this pattern of whatever it is. In this case, could be a punishment, could be whatever. But at some point, I mean, the human in us comes out and says, it just doesn't seem right, man. That's just some emotional thing that just doesn't seem right. Something's not right. Yeah. And in many cases, we see that today. I mean, I don't mean to jump to segue to a different topic, but you see it a lot in... and I'm not talking specific to any religion, but I'm talking religion in general. I mean, religion, when you think of religion, you think, okay, this is a very spiritual, safe way of expressing who you are and amongst your brothers, right? But it just happens to be that brother has to be, or sister has to be of a certain race or maybe ethnicity and what have you. And if you don't fit that picture, then for some reason, that spiritual being that you're being blessed with doesn't really translate or transcend to other people. And I think sometimes we become zombies to that, because we want to believe that, yes, the word of the Lord, the word of God, whatever God it is, but I can't transcend that same feeling to the person across from me that happens to be human. We happen to discriminate in some cases, and to some cases we use that as means to want to go to war and want to attack. And then you look at the human nature and I go, man, is that just human nature? I mean, or doesn't this ideology or religion supposed to kind of give us an umbrella to protect us from being such savages and or brutal with each other? I mean, that's crazy. But sometimes, I mean, you look at zombie, and I look at it that way, that we are conditioned to believe that this is how we should be. Yeah. But the actions that we do don't reflect that.
Well, I mean, you could translate, since you kind of touched the religion word, you could almost say like the same idea like with the Crusades, where at that time it was about protecting the certain religions and fighting those that were against it. But then looking back now, you would say like, what are we doing? Like, the spiritual battle is still there, but we're not doing it with swords and killing each other. We're doing it other means. You know?
Yeah, and those were some really ugly times. You know, as a matter of fact, I was watching this documentary, a series of just the history of Europe, right? And it was interesting to see because, you know, how Europe became like what it is today. I mean, there's a lot of history, and in between that history, a lot of wars, and in those wars, there's domination of religions also. Like you said it best, I think. When the Crusaders came into play, I think they were looking to get and protect the Catholic Church. Yeah. And at that time, they were sent out, Catholic or Anglican Church, went back to Jerusalem, took over, plundered 4 times. It wasn't once, it was 4 times within that history, back and forth, again, every single time, plundering and taking advantage of it for the sake of what? Right? I mean, you look at that. But I mean, it shaped what Europe is today. It shaped what we are today. And it's funny because if you go back and you look at that, you say, wow, I mean, I didn't know that this was this brutal to get to this point. But even prior to that, I mean, go back to Roman times and all that. But it's crazy.
No, I was thinking about Roman times and, you know, the idea of gladiators and fighting to the death. And, you know, that just goes to show we've always had an appetite for that, right? But it almost seems like with the more you give or the closer you put the people to death or to that type of experience, the more likely it is, or it does desensitize them, right? And, you know, you go from like gladiator times all the way to like the cowboy times in Tombstone, where it's like, we have a disagreement, you cheated me, let's go outside and we're going to have a gun draw. You know, and that's perfectly legal, but somebody's going to lose their life right there. And I have no problem taking your life all of a sudden. You know, that's being desensitized to that time, right? And so you think about now where it's like, you know, not having, you know, public hangings and things like that. So like, I think the human nature of us, it's like, yeah, we may be able to see that stuff on TV. Doesn't mean that we could stomach that in person. You know, doesn't mean that we, you know, that's something that we could, you know, tolerate. But if it was like a normal, hey, every Saturday we're going to go and see the, you know, bad guys get killed, then all of a sudden I think that would turn society into a negative, because you'd have more people starting to be exposed to that and develop like kind of an appetite for it, right? And so I don't know. It is interesting. It is interesting.
My only argument to when you say it's not there is, if you look at like a sport like hockey only exists because of the brutal fighting. You know, that happens every once in a while. Like, people are there rooting on the fight. They care less about the 1 or 2 scores that are going on. But when the fight happens, everybody stands up and it's like, yeah, go at it, you know. And I think it's the same thing when we look at like boxing. Like, boxing was getting boring, and then you sprawled into this whole MMA, and it's more blood and more battling, and it's like almost to the death, and the guy like passes out. I mean, how much closer do you want to see a dead body, in a sense, of the guy going limp and just being there? So I mean, there's definitely a craving, because that industry is flourishing.
Yeah, no, I think it's a big part.
We just don't want the death. We don't want to find out the guy died. There is still some that. But
Yeah,
we're moving that line very close to where we're going to say, well, you can cut his arm off, but just patch it up real quick so he doesn't die, you know?
No, it is crazy. And I will say that, like you were saying, Abel, that what we've kind of come to modern day gladiators is what you're saying. It's the UFC, right? We love to see that. For some reason, that sparks something inside of us. And when it comes to zombies, I'll go back. I had this thing with the Modern Warfare, right? Game again. I played it.
Oh, yeah.
But it's funny how they depict these half. I mean, you can see half of their skeletal frame, you know, but they're oozing and they're coming really slow. And I mean, Michael Jackson, obviously, the Thriller made it famous. But you kind of see these zombies, and you know, you don't care that they're zombies, so you're going to use whatever they give you all these weapons to utilize, and you see them. I mean, this is a Quentin Tarantino type of deal, right? Yeah. You see them, and they almost, in a way, you know, they disappear, but they keep on coming. They don't stop coming. So no matter, you go through these levels of it, but you're always trying to, again, make sure that they don't get to you, right? And I think that type of desensitization, I mean, or we get desensitized, right? And we look at this, it happens a lot. We see it in movies, we see it in media. So what message are you trying to give folks? I mean, it's not an actual person. You don't see a race. You don't see a enemy yet.
Well, in that depiction, but yeah.
But
yeah.
typically, I mean, it's already getting you trained. Like, hey, that's a bad guy. I know that's a bad guy because it's a zombie.
Yeah.
Well,
That's like Walking Dead, though. I think that's where I liked their earlier seasons, is because it was like, well, now it's Abel, and I know Abel, and he's a zombie, but do I kill him, or is he going to kill me? And that hesitation there of like, again, putting the human aspect to the zombie, because like you're saying, like they're all mutilated. I don't even know what it is.
It's
barely
easy. It's
human.
easy to kill that.
You know? But training people to say like, okay, well, the zombie is now your best friend or your wife or whoever. Like, you gonna shoot him? You gonna kill him? You gonna like cut the head off? Because that's whatever that happens to be the way the known method of finally like stopping it.
Well, yeah, I'll ask this question. You know, we talked about, you know, the like Mad Men and everything's a marketing. You know, there's an idea behind everything, right? And there's a concept. So we're talking about, you know, kind of grooming people to see a target, kill a target. You know, and that's the bad guy. You're creating these early triggers. You know, are we? You know, the educational system was built around creating people, good workers, good employees, right? Show up at a certain time. We'll tell you when to take a break. We'll tell you when to take lunch. We'll tell you when to go home. You know, don't be late, that sort of thing, right? Everything's disciplined. Well, are we training, you know, future soldiers? You know, are we getting them prepared so that it's easier to say, you know, all right, now that's the enemy, right? You know, even in athletics, you know, you wear different jerseys, different uniforms, and that's the enemy. Go after them, you know. All right, that's the competition, right? That's who we're going after, right? And it's just, you know, I think naturally we as people crave that competition and that, you know, that just that environment. And so, but if we can, you know, get you groomed up, and so then this way when you turn 18, now we recruit you, and now we're doing it for real on the battlefield, and we have, you know, great athletes out there that, you know, are helping us win. And, you know, that control, you know, you talk about religion, and I think for, you know, throughout history, you know, religion has been a numbers game, right? And it's not, you know, you got, you know, kings and, you know, leaders who are pushing, I'm fighting for this religion. Well, really, they're fighting to quench the thirst of those people, right? You have a people who believe in something. Well, you're probably not going to believe in me, but if I say that I represent you in this religion, and I have your back with it, and this is what I'm trying to bring light, and man, those people don't understand, and they're never going to have salvation and get to heaven, and so we have to take it upon ourselves to, you know, spread this word. So let's go, you know, who's with me? And now you have soldiers who have like a cause to fight that's motivated by the all-powerful God, right? Versus like, oh yeah, Jose, I really believe in you, I'm gonna go fight for you. You know, it's like, Jose, you probably can get people to you could barely get people to knock on doors and say, hey, vote for Jose.
That's right.
Right? Let alone go fight wars. But if you find that, you know, what's really important to you? Oh, God, you know, oh, Jesus, you know, guess what? I love Jesus. I want everybody to love Jesus too. And then now all of a sudden you're pulling at those heartstrings that are near and dear to their hearts. And we've seen that generation after generation.
Oh, yeah. And I think this is why for Trash Can Kicker, was that
Yeah.
Trash Can Kicker?
Yeah, Trash Can Kicker. He actually said amazing podcast. Thank you.
Yeah. And
If we ever witness a zombie apocalypse during my time on planet Earth, hopefully they are zombies from Walking Dead and not the ones from World War Z.
there you go. There you go. And that's good because, truthfully, like I said, May is the Zombie Awareness Month. And the reason why they chose that is because that's typical when these movies were set, and that's Night of the Living, or what is it, Night of the Living Dead? Is that the, anyhow.
That's one of them, yeah.
But we want to recognize Trash Can Kicker and all those zombie apocalypse fans out there. If there's anyone else that wishes to make comments, feel free to reach out to us. If there's any other topics you'd like to talk about, the jargoneers here can certainly tackle on that, and we'll make sure that we make a show out of it.
You know, and I think we did a pretty good job of taking that random topic and bringing some good substance to it and bringing it back to how it applies to our everyday lives, right? And how, you know, we are essentially being affected now.
Now, before we finish, let me ask you a question. We've been doing this for some time now, right? What would you say? We're going on a year and a half, 2 years, maybe?
Something like that.
Something
Yeah,
like that,
yeah.
right? Have we moved that needle a bit? I mean, as far as personally, show-wise, jargoneer. I mean, we tackle on just about any topic, right? And we tend to, like you said, we tend to do a pretty good job of covering that topic. I mean, we try not to get too caught up in the political arenas of it, but I mean, you know, it's a good show. I think it is. It's a good way to bounce back ideas. between each other. I mean, we don't always agree. I think your philosophy regarding the zombies and yours and mine may differ, but at the end of the day, we're able to make another follower satisfied. So follow us, like us, comment, subscribe.
Yeah, and today's episode is proof that if you comment and if you give us a topic, we will talk about it. So we're here for the people, by the people,
For
with
the
the people, for the people.